Depending on your situation, there may be months that are better or worse for you to retire. I've seen this firsthand with my own clients, so hopefully, this information that helps them also helps you in your own retirement decisions. Oh, and if you have any additional insights to provide those who haven't retired, if you already have, please share it in the comments below. It could be helpful for someone else. All right, I'm going to use this chart to explain most of what's going on. So you see, you have beginning of the year, middle, and late. And I didn't go into every specific month, but I kind of break it into three categories. They're not equal in length. I call beginning of the year kind of January to March. You'll kind of see why later. Middle being April to July, and late being August to December. We'll get into that. And we'll go over financial pros. We'll go over financial cons. We'll go over non-financial pros and non-financial cons. So let's get into it. Looking at the beginning of the year, here are some pros financially if you decide to retire in this time. So I think one of the first ones is that it makes it a lot easier. Oops, got the wrong little one right there. I think it makes it a lot easier to plan. Also, I apologize for my handwriting. Was not blessed with good handwriting, and I'm a lefty, and so I have to write weird. So just I apologize, but let's keep going. I think that this allows for you to easily plan the rest of your year because you're really starting off, especially if you retire like right at the beginning of the year, you're starting off at zero or close to zero from an income standpoint. So then you can look at all of your other assets and incomes and you can really plan out some of those other tax planning strategies. Another one of those strategies is Roth conversions because you might want to butt up right to a certain tax bracket. And if you know your income at the beginning of the year because you can plan it so well, it's a lot better than if income's a little bit volatile from bonuses or other things that come in. So I'm going to put Roth conversions in this category too as a pro. All right. Another pro is something called tax gain harvesting. So as you're getting into retirement, maybe you have some sort of concentrated stock position. Maybe that's part of actually your retirement plan because you were working at a company. Well, this might even allow for you to take some of those gains earlier in the year. And you might know, well, if my income is going to be zero from other sources, then we can really be strategic. And let me get my trusty little sheet here. If you're looking at it, if you're a married couple, your income plus your capital gains, you can have up to 96,700 in 2025 without paying any sort of capital gains tax. So those are things you can take advantage of early in the year. Last little benefit, I'm going to call it a little pension benefit. Let's throw that right there. And this is, again, somewhat situationally dependent, but for some pensions, it's based off of your years of service or calendar years of service. It really depends on which one, but you maybe finish the year prior, you get a boost in your pension, and then you can retire right after that. All right, now let's move over to the cons category here. One of the financial cons, if you are retiring really early, is that you could miss out on some additional 401k contributions. So a 401k, you can only fund it through payroll deductions, meaning you can't just say at the beginning of the year, I'm going to fund it for $20,000, something like that. Most of the time, what has to happen is it has to come out of your paycheck. And most people probably can't fill up right now, like the $30,000 401k limit. It's actually, let's just be exact here really quick. If we're going to be exact, for 2025, it is going to be $31,000, sorry, if you qualify for the age 50 plus catch up. So most people can't fill that up in just like one or two paychecks. So if you do retire really early and you want to take advantage of the 401k contribution limits, which are way higher compared to other retirement accounts, you're going to miss out on that if you retire too early. All right, let's look at some of the non-financial pros here. So one of the first ones is goal setting. There is a reason that New Year's resolutions are so popular because they can work, and psychologically people like knowing that it's the beginning of the year and I can just set some goals aside and I can do them. And that also works, I think, for retirement, and it can be helpful with other goals you might have, whether it's getting involved in clubs, some charity, whatever that might be. Doing it at the beginning of the year could be a good way to do it. All right, let's look at some of the non-financial cons here. One of them is that depending on where you live, it could be really quite cold and chilly where you retire. And this actually is important because the SADS, if you ever heard of that, seasonal affective disorder, where people get a little bit more depressed during some of the colder winter months, the research shows that it's far more prevalent the further north you are than being in the south where there's going to be more sun and more heat. And so if you're someone that would be really affected by this and you need to have things going on to keep you busy to avoid SADS, you really want to be mindful of this. If you're going to stop work and then you're just kind of going to be sitting in limbo where it doesn't get, that it doesn't get light until 8 o'clock and the sun goes down at 4, it might not be a great time to retire. All right, the last non-financial con I'm going to say is actually moving. So, if your retirement picture called for you to move after you retire, maybe you want to move somewhere warm, it just may be a really not great time to be moving. When it's cold, you might be dealing with snow as you're trying to get stuff out of your house, or depending on where you're going to go by. I actually really think this should be also in a financial con is moving, because you're going to be limited on the number of homes that are available for you unless you've already purchased it. There's going to be fewer buyers in the market. Not saying that you can't sell it, but there are going to be fewer buyers. And those are things that you'd want to consider depending on your own personal situation. All right, let's move to the middle months. I'm calling this like April to July, because April, depending on where you live, can be honestly quite beautiful. So I kind of view that more as middle versus those like cold, frigid winter months. So let's look at some of these pros right away. I'm going to say one of the financial pros is that your 401k likely could be not fully filled up, but much of the way filled up. If you were being really aggressive with some of those payroll deductions earlier in the year, that can be good if it fits your plan. I'm going to do another pro, which is probably going to be the home sale. And again, we just talked about that a second ago, but you're going to have more buyers in the market. So if you are going to sell, it could be a better time. Again, I know you might say, well, there's more sellers, so it evens out. That's true. But instead of getting the same price and having your home wait for 30 days on the market, it might sell in 3 days. And that's going to be a lot better. All right, let's look at some of these financial cons here. I'm going to put one of the cons, I'm going to say planning. And this is more from like a financial planning standpoint. If you've gone, let's say, half the year and you've made some income, it is tougher to do some sort of financial planning and tax management or tax mitigation strategies midway through the year. You saw me bring up earlier the capital gains tax that, you're probably retiring in your highest earning years, maybe a little bit less in your highest earning years. So there aren't as many planning opportunities versus if you retired at the beginning of the year. Okay, another financial con, I'm gonna call this travel cost. Now, it might be a phenomenal time to travel, but the costs are just going to be more expensive. This isn't a huge deal, and this might be the optimal time to travel, but if money is a factor, it's just not maybe the best time to do it. But again, that's up to you. It really depends on your situation. Alternatively, one of the non-financial pros is travel weather. All right, watch me spell this whole thing. That's some ugly handwriting right there, but that's what we got to deal with. The weather can be phenomenal during this time, especially like April. It can be an awesome time to travel, retire, go see grandchildren. It can be beautiful to go travel this time. It might be more expensive because everyone else wants to travel, but hopefully the extra money you spend traveling, which may be some amount of money, could be worth it if the weather is that great. All right, another non-financial pro, I'm gonna call this grandchildren. Okay. The reason why is if you're going to retire, let's say it's even like April or March, you think, oh, I'm going to hang out with my grandkids. Well, they might have school. All right. But if you go during the summer months, odds are they might still have activities, but you can still hang out with them a lot more than if they were in their school years, because during that time in school, there's just not that much flexibility, other activities, they're tired, they don't want to hang out with grandma and grandpa. But in the summer, can be a lot more fun. And that's when you can go get them ice cream, go spoil them. All right. One of the non financial cons here is going to be the old summer heat. All right. Traveling sounds great until you are 4 hours into your Colosseum tour in Rome and you are sweating everywhere and you're not having a good time and you think, I should have just done this, you know, late or early spring, something like that. But instead, it's really warm, it's not fun. You want to be mindful of that summer heat because that can make these cool travel plans not very fun. All right, so we're back to looking at the late time of the year. We're talking like August to December. I know it's a really broad range, but I think segmenting it out too much could just not be useful. Let's look at some of the financial pros. I'm going to start off with a little question mark. I honestly cannot come up with that many for this time of the year. Apart from like pension, social security, or bonus timing, which is highly specific to your situation, I really couldn't find other great reasons to retire towards the end of the year here. I think maybe one of the only other ones, you've had a lot of time to contribute maybe to your company's retirement plan and 401k. Let's say you couldn't forego most of your paycheck to do payroll deductions at the beginning of the year. So if you have most of the year to do that, then you filled up a good year of your 401k. Maybe you're putting money into the Roth. Whatever that might be, that's maybe the only big benefit I could really think of. If you have a different benefit, put it in the comments. I may have missed something. As much as my wife tells me that I'm so great and perfect, I know I'm not. So put it down in the comments. All right, one of the financial cons, I'm going to throw in here medical, because let's say that you have a medical issue and let's say you've hit your deductible or your out of pocket maximum in the middle of the year, but then you retire and let's say it's like September. Well, the problem is you can either go on Cobra, which is going to be way more expensive, or you'll have to go to the marketplace. You can probably get a plan if you leave your job. The problem is you get that new plan, you've lost all that work you've done for reaching that deductible. And so I don't think it's a great time to retire as far as like your medical expenses are concerned. I'd almost wait for a different time of the year to do so. All right, here's another one. I'm going to put a financial con as your bonus. Again, every company is different, but I do often find that a lot of bonuses for a year are done at the beginning of the next year. And so if you're retiring, let's say November, but you waited 2 more months, you could get a huge bonus. Again, depending on where you work, the bonus can be a huge part of your pay. Then retiring those few months early just might not make sense when it's at the end of the year. All right, let's look at some of the non-financial pros here. One of the non-financial pros I would write down here would be psyche. So kind of like the psychological benefits that you have of just finishing out the year. And this kind of goes back to the psychological benefits of retiring at the beginning of the year. So it's close to the same thing, where let's say you retire in like the last week of December. That's essentially retiring and then starting your retirement in the next year, January. And it can just be really good. Just have that nice clean cut. All right. Another non-financial pro could be your goodbyes. It can be hard depending on where you work to say your goodbyes to everyone. But if you have some sort of Christmas party at the end of the year, and it might even usually those aren't like around Christmas, they're usually earlier, let's say like early December. Well, then it's a good opportunity for you to say goodbye. You might even be recognized. Those can be a really good time to just end it and do it towards the end of the year. It could be also helpful for your other colleagues and their own job responsibilities. All right, I'm going to have an edgy one here. Okay, one of the non-financial cons, I'm going to say holidays. And you might think that's counterintuitive. I want to enjoy my holidays with my family. That's great. But you know what your family doesn't have? Unlimited time off. They're probably getting a similar amount of time off for the holidays as you're getting. But then if you have way more time, let's say you retired in early November thinking I'm going to have a great Thanksgiving and Christmas, have all this time hang out with grandkids, but they get 1 or 2 days off Thanksgiving and then they might get a couple days off for Christmas. You were probably already going to get that, or you can maybe take PTO, and then your grandkids have to go back to school. Your kids probably have to go back to work. So it's not the perfect time to get maximum family time compared to, let's say, the summer when you can go hang out at their house for a week. You might be a nuisance, but if you clean a little bit, it'll probably be okay. So I actually would put the holidays and retiring around them as a con, not financially. That's edgy. If you disagree with me, please put it in the comments. So what do you think? Are there items that I'm missing here? I know that I probably didn't hit everything. If there are any, please send them in the comments, not for my benefit, but maybe for someone else who comes across this video that's maybe making this decision. If you learned anything, please like and subscribe. Godspeed and happy planning.